The wrestling world thought they had seen everything. After months of speculation, rumors, and false alarms, fans had almost given up hope of seeing Roman Reigns back in a WWE ring anytime soon. The tribal chief had been conspicuously absent from programming, his whereabouts unknown, his return date shrouded in mystery and deliberate corporate silence. Social media was flooded daily with questions about when he would come back, theories about what he was doing during his time away, and desperate pleas from fans who missed the dominant presence that had defined WWE for years. But nobody, absolutely nobody, could have predicted the violent and shocking manner in which Roman Reigns would make his return, or the devastating consequences that would follow for one particular superstar. Monday Night Raw was unfolding like any other episode. The arena was packed with enthusiastic fans, the energy typical of a weekly show with solid matches and entertaining segments, but nothing that felt particularly historic or groundbreaking. Bronson Reed had been dominating his segment, doing what he does best, using his massive frame and surprising agility to dismantle his opponent with ruthless efficiency. The Australian powerhouse had been on an absolute tear in recent weeks, establishing himself as one of the most dangerous and feared competitors on the entire roster. His tsunami splash had become one of the most devastating finishing moves in all of wrestling, with victims struggling to recover after being crushed under his considerable weight delivered from the top rope. Reed stood in the center of the ring, his chest heaving with exertion, sweat glistening on his tattooed shoulders and arms. He had just finished destroying yet another unfortunate soul who had the misfortune of being booked against him. The crowd was reacting with that mixture of awe and concern that follows particularly brutal displays of power. Reed was playing to the audience, his arms raised in victory, his face showing that characteristic blend of satisfaction and hunger for more destruction. He was on top of his game, feeling invincible, believing that nothing and nobody could stop his momentum. Then the lights went out. Complete and total darkness enveloped the arena in an instant. The sudden blackout caused a ripple of confusion and excitement through the crowd. This wasn't scheduled. This wasn't part of the advertised show. Something unexpected was happening, and the WWE Universe collectively held its breath, phones raised in the darkness, recording whatever was about to unfold. The commentators fell silent, equally confused and intrigued by this unplanned development. When the lights came back on mere seconds later, the arena exploded. The roar was deafening, a wall of sound that seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. Standing on the entrance ramp, looking exactly like the dominant force that had ruled WWE with an iron fist for years, was Roman Reigns. The tribal chief had returned. His presence was commanding, his stance unmistakable, his eyes locked on the ring with an intensity that could be felt throughout the entire venue. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't playing to the crowd. He looked like a man on a mission, like someone with a very specific purpose in mind. Bronson Reed's expression in the ring transformed instantly from confident dominance to something approaching genuine concern. His body language shifted, his posture becoming more defensive, his eyes widening as he processed what he was seeing. Reed knew exactly what this meant. He understood that Roman Reigns didn't just show up randomly. The tribal chief operated with purpose, with intention, with a calculated approach to everything he did. And right now, all of that focus and intensity was directed squarely at him. Roman began his walk down the ramp, but this wasn't his typical measured, methodical entrance. There was urgency in his movement, a barely contained fury that was evident in every step. He moved with purpose and speed, his eyes never leaving Reed, his jaw clenched with obvious anger. The crowd was absolutely losing their minds, the noise reaching levels that made commentary nearly impossible. Some fans were chanting "Tribal Chief," while others were simply screaming in excitement and anticipation of what was about to happen. Reed made a decision in that moment. He could either stand his ground and face whatever was coming, or he could try to escape and regroup. Pride and professional instinct told him to stay and fight, but survival instinct was screaming at him to get out of that ring immediately. He chose the latter, rolling under the bottom rope and backing up the entrance ramp, his hands raised in a gesture that seemed to be asking for a moment to talk, to explain, to negotiate whatever issue had brought Roman Reigns back with such obvious violent intent. But Roman wasn't interested in talking. The tribal chief broke into a run, his powerful legs carrying him forward with surprising speed for a man of his size. Reed turned to flee completely, heading toward the backstage area, but he was too slow. Roman caught him just as he reached the top of the ramp, grabbing him by the back of his ring gear and spinning him around with violent force. The first punch landed before Reed could even raise his hands to defend himself. The impact was sickening. Roman's fist connected with Reed's jaw with the full force of months of pent-up aggression and whatever grievance had motivated this attack. Reed staggered backward, his legs going wobbly, his massive frame suddenly looking vulnerable. But Roman didn't give him a chance to recover or fall. He grabbed Reed by the throat with one hand, his fingers digging into the flesh, and delivered another devastating punch with his free hand. Then another. And another. The assault was relentless and brutal. Roman wasn't wrestling. He was fighting with the kind of raw violence that transcended performance and entered into something that looked genuinely dangerous. Each punch landed with authority, with bad intentions, with a force that made even the most hardcore fans wince. Reed tried to cover up, tried to defend himself, but he was overwhelmed by the ferocity and suddenness of the attack. His size advantage meant nothing against Roman's focused rage. Security personnel came rushing from the back, a swarm of officials in their black shirts and khaki pants, trying to reach the scene of the attack and separate the two men. But Roman saw them coming and made a quick decision. He grabbed Reed and began dragging him, not toward the ring or the backstage area, but toward the edge of the stage. The crowd realized what was about to happen a split second before it did, their collective gasp audible even over the general chaos and noise. Roman lifted Reed, showcasing incredible strength as he hoisted the nearly 300-pound powerhouse up and over his head. For a moment, Reed was suspended in the air, his body horizontal, completely at Roman's mercy. Then the tribal chief threw him off the stage. Reed's body fell through the air, a sickening moment of freefall, before crashing into the equipment and tables set up below the stage level. The impact was catastrophic. Tables splintered. Equipment scattered. The sound of the crash echoed through the arena like a bomb going off. The crowd reaction was a mixture of absolute shock and morbid excitement. Some fans were on their feet, hands on their heads in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. Others were frantically recording on their phones, knowing they were capturing something that would be replayed and discussed endlessly. The commentators were screaming about how this had gone too far, how someone needed to stop this immediately, how Reed could be seriously injured. But Roman Reigns wasn't finished. As security finally reached him, trying to hold him back and prevent him from jumping off the stage to continue the assault, Roman shrugged them off with ease. He stared down at Reed's crumpled form among the wreckage below, his chest heaving, his face a mask of rage that still hadn't been satisfied. Then he did something that shocked everyone even more. He jumped off the stage himself, landing among the debris, immediately seeking out Reed's body to continue the punishment. Medical personnel were scrambling now, trying to reach the scene while also staying out of Roman's way as he grabbed Reed again. The Australian powerhouse was barely conscious, his body limp and unresponsive, blood visible on his face from cuts sustained in the fall. Roman pulled him up out of the wreckage, propping his nearly lifeless body against some equipment cases, and delivered a Superman punch that snapped Reed's head back violently. The punch seemed to take the last bit of fight completely out of Reed. His body slumped, held upright only by Roman's grip on his gear. The tribal chief stared into Reed's glazed eyes for a moment, seeming to search for something, some acknowledgement or understanding. Then he positioned Reed for his finishing move, the spear. The crowd was in a frenzy, some begging him to stop, others encouraging the total destruction of Bronson Reed. Roman took several steps back, creating distance, then charged forward with explosive power. The spear connected with devastating force, driving Reed backward through another piece of equipment. The collision of bodies and breaking materials created another tremendous crash. Reed's body went completely limp, sliding down to lay motionless among the wreckage. Roman stood over him, finally seeming satisfied, his point made in the most violent and definitive way possible. Security and medical personnel immediately swarmed the scene. Roman allowed them to finally surround him, but he didn't leave. He stood there, watching as medical staff checked on Reed, checking his consciousness, assessing what had to be serious injuries. The camera caught Roman's face in close-up, and what was visible there was chilling. There was no remorse, no concern, no second-guessing. There was only cold satisfaction and the clear message that whoever crossed the tribal chief would face severe consequences. EMTs were calling for additional medical support, their urgent voices caught by the cameras. Reed wasn't moving on his own, wasn't responding to questions or commands. The severity of the situation was becoming more apparent with each passing second. This wasn't just a wrestling angle playing out for dramatic effect. Someone appeared to be genuinely hurt, possibly seriously so. The atmosphere in the arena had shifted from excitement to genuine concern. A stretcher was brought out, along with a backboard and neck brace. The medical team was taking every precaution, treating this as they would any potential spinal or head injury. They carefully immobilized Reed's neck, working together to gently roll him onto the backboard, then secure him to the stretcher. The entire time, cameras captured every moment, every concerned expression on the medical staff's faces, every instance of Reed's continued non-responsiveness. Roman Reigns finally left the scene, walking back toward the backstage area through the crowd of security and medical personnel. He didn't acknowledge the crowd or the cameras. He simply walked away, his mission accomplished, leaving absolute carnage in his wake. The commentators were trying to process what had just happened, attempting to provide context while also expressing appropriate concern for Reed's well-being. Replays from multiple angles showed the attack in brutal detail: the initial assault, the throw off the stage, the continued beating, the spear through the equipment. As Reed was carefully wheeled toward the backstage area and presumably to a waiting ambulance, updates began trickling in. He was conscious but disoriented. He was complaining of pain in his back, neck, and ribs. He was being taken to a local medical facility for evaluation and treatment. The show had to continue, but everything felt overshadowed by what had just occurred. Every subsequent segment existed in the shadow of Roman Reigns' shocking and violent return. Social media exploded within minutes. Clips of the attack went viral immediately, trending worldwide across every platform. Wrestling fans, sports media, and even mainstream outlets picked up the story. Roman Reigns returns and hospitalizes Bronson Reed became the headline everywhere. Debate raged about whether the attack had gone too far, whether Reed was truly injured, or if this was masterful selling. What had motivated such brutality from the tribal chief? The questions were endless and immediate. Why had Roman targeted Bronson Reed specifically? What had Reed done during Roman's absence to earn such violent retribution? Was this personal or strategic? Was Roman sending a message to the entire roster that he was back and more dangerous than ever? Theories proliferated across fan forums and social media. Some pointed to comments Reed had made weeks earlier about the tribal chief era being over. Others suggested this was about establishing dominance and reminding everyone that Roman's spot at the top wasn't up for negotiation. Behind-the-scenes information began leaking throughout the evening and into the next day. According to sources close to the situation, Bronson Reed had indeed been transported to a California hospital immediately following the attack. The reports indicated he was undergoing extensive medical evaluation, including X-rays, CT scans, and neurological testing. The WWE medical team was being deliberately cautious given the nature of the bumps Reed had taken, particularly the fall off the stage and the spear through the equipment. As Tuesday arrived, official updates were sparse but concerning. WWE released a brief statement acknowledging that Bronson Reed had been taken to a medical facility for evaluation following Monday Night Raw and that more information would be provided as it became available. The carefully worded statement did nothing to quell speculation and actually increased concern among fans who worried that the vague language meant the injuries were more serious than they hoped. Wrestling journalists were working their sources, trying to get concrete information about Reed's condition. Reports varied wildly, with some suggesting he had been released from the hospital with minor injuries, while others claimed he was being held for observation due to concussion concerns or potential rib injuries. The lack of definitive information created an information vacuum that speculation rushed to fill. Paul "Triple H" Levesque, WWE's chief content officer, was reportedly furious about the attack, according to backstage sources. Not furious at the storyline or the execution, but furious in the context of the narrative being told. The attack had been designed to blur the lines between reality and fiction, to make fans genuinely uncertain about what was real and what was performance. From that perspective, the confusion and concern about Reed's health was actually evidence of successful storytelling, as uncomfortable as that might be to acknowledge. Bronson Reed's social media remained silent in the immediate aftermath, adding to the uncertainty. Fans scoured his accounts for any sign of activity, any update on his condition, anything that might provide clarity. The silence was deafening and concerning. Was he too injured to post? Was he being advised not to break character? Was WWE deliberately maintaining the ambiguity to keep people guessing and talking? Meanwhile, Roman Reigns' return dominated every wrestling conversation. Analysis videos were posted by the hundreds, breaking down every aspect of the attack, examining the psychology behind it, debating the implications for upcoming storylines and potential matches. The wrestling world hadn't been this collectively focused on a single moment in months, possibly years. Love him or hate him, Roman Reigns had reminded everyone why he's called the Tribal Chief, why he's the biggest star in WWE, why everything in the company revolves around him. The motivations behind the attack became clearer as more context emerged throughout the week. During Roman's absence, Bronson Reed had been increasingly vocal about the new era of WWE, about how the company had moved on from the Tribal Chief era, about how new stars like himself were the future and the past needed to stay in the past. Reed had claimed the island of relevancy for himself, using Roman's own terminology against him, suggesting that Roman's time at the top was finished and that he belonged to a previous era that WWE had evolved beyond. These comments, made over several weeks through interviews and social media posts, had apparently reached Roman during his time away. The Tribal Chief is known for his long memory and his methodical approach to addressing disrespect. He doesn't react immediately or emotionally. He plans, he waits for the right moment, and then he strikes with maximum impact. His return attack on Reed was clearly the culmination of weeks or months of perceived disrespect festering and building into the explosive violence that had shocked the wrestling world. From a storytelling perspective, the attack accomplished multiple objectives simultaneously. It announced Roman's return in the most impactful way possible, ensuring maximum attention and making the wrestling world revolve around him immediately. It established him as an even more dangerous and ruthless character than before, someone willing to hospitalize an opponent to make a point. It created a major storyline with Bronson Reed that could develop over weeks or months, assuming Reed's injuries were either not serious or part of the narrative. And it sent a clear message to every other wrestler on the roster that Roman Reigns was back and nobody was safe from his wrath. The physical execution of the attack also deserves examination. The throw off the stage was a high-risk spot that required tremendous trust between performers and careful planning to execute as safely as possible while still looking absolutely devastating. Reed had to position himself correctly for the fall, land in a way that protected vital areas while still looking completely out of control, and sell the impact as if he'd truly been thrown carelessly off a high structure. The spear through the equipment required similar careful choreography disguised as chaotic violence. Yet, even with careful planning and professional execution, there were genuine risks involved. Falls from height are always dangerous in wrestling, regardless of precautions. Landing wrong could result in actual injury even with crash pads and breakaway equipment. The continued assault on an unpadded concrete floor backstage area increased those risks significantly. Whether Reed sustained real injuries or was selling masterfully became a legitimate question because the potential for actual harm was very real. By Wednesday, more concrete information began to surface. Multiple wrestling news outlets reported that Bronson Reed had indeed spent Monday night in a California hospital undergoing evaluation, but had been released Tuesday morning. The reported diagnosis included severe bruising to his ribs and back, a minor concussion, and various cuts and abrasions, but thankfully nothing that would require extended hospitalization or surgery. These reports, if accurate, suggested that while Reed had certainly been battered, he hadn't suffered career-threatening or life-altering injuries. However, the ambiguity remained about how much of the injury report was legitimate medical information and how much was WWE maintaining the storyline. In modern wrestling, companies have become increasingly sophisticated at working fans, at blurring reality and fiction to create more compelling narratives.